Hey everybody, we're here at Red Rocks Race and Sportsbook. It's Jason, I'm Chucky, for the Sports Betting Podcast Bookends, as usual, powered by STN Sports. And we're going to start with a little college football. And there's been some great games the last couple of weeks. I mean, full schedules, great games. There's teams with 2 losses now that are on the cusp or are in. So a lot of teams stubbing their toe, they could be out. We don't necessarily agree with the way the committee has everything set up right now, with teams that might get a bye, and that number 5 spot seems to be maybe kind of a good spot right now if you end up there. But looking at this week's games, one of the big games here is UNLV playing Friday night at San Jose State. They're a little over a touchdown favorite, but huge game for UNLV. They're going to need some help. They're going to need Fresno to hopefully knock Colorado State off on Saturday, one of the late games. But this is a big game for UNLV.
Yeah, and we saw San Jose State have the chance to go in there and knock off Boise State, and they took the early lead, and then they kind of turnovered it away, had some really bad turnovers that allowed Boise to get back into that game. And you talked about from a committee standpoint, and I'm sure we could spend 2 hours talking about the college football playoff and the rankings and everything like that. And obviously, with 2 weeks left to go in the season, a full conference championships, a lot of things are going to change between now and the way that they have the rankings now. But again, very frustrating to look at the way the rankings are from a Las Vegas bookmaker, handicapper standpoint, where we see the 8 seed Miami as the number 3 seed in the college football playoff, and Boise State, the 12 seed, really getting the number 4 seed because they're the highest ranked conference champion.
No sense.
And so those teams get buys, and then we have this juggernaut of SEC teams that, as we sit today, would be playing road games essentially against an Indiana, a Penn State, and a Notre Dame. And those SEC teams would be favorites on the roads in all those games. So I know there's a committee, and they're trying to get the 12 best teams in and mix the conference play in, and the conversations about strength of schedule and all that type of stuff. But if they really want the answer to getting the top 12 teams in the country, give us a call. We'll tell you how we have the power ratings. We'll tell you who's going to be favored, who's going to be a dog, because with Indiana,
we spent 2 hours on it today.
Indiana currently sitting as the 5 team in the country. I mean, there's probably 10 teams in the country that would be favored over Indiana.
But they figure to lose this week. I mean, they're a big underdog. Not that they can't win that game, but it's going to change dramatically. I think this is their first test. They're 2 touchdown underdogs. They lose this week, it really kind of changes it a lot. They're going to drop significantly if they stay in.
I get it, and I don't want to go too deep, but Texas hasn't played a whole lot of good teams. Right. They have they have an A&M on their schedule. They have to play in an SEC championship game. So we'll see where Texas, they're going to have to earn their money to get through those games. Indiana obviously has to go beat Ohio State, but if they lose to Ohio State and they don't play in a Big Ten championship game and they still stay in the college football playoff ahead of a Tennessee or teams of that nature that are in that 11-12, a Colorado if they win out. It just seems wrong to me, but we won't go too deep into it. But again, to your point, the way that the rankings are working, the 5 seed in the college football rankings seems like the gift that keeps on giving, because you're going to play the 12th seed, essentially the last team to get into the college football plan with the 12, and then you're going to go into what is the number 4 team in the college football playoff rankings, which is the worst of the college football champions. So either the Big 12 Conference Championship or the Mountain West Conference Champion will get that 4 seed. And as it sits today, Ohio State is the number 5 team in the country. They would be approximately a 17-point favorite over BYU, and then they'd be another 15 to 16-point favorite over Boise State. So that is a gift of a bracket from that standpoint.
Like you said,
I digress. We'll go back to UNLV.
We'll dive into that. We'll dive into that more in the next couple of weeks. Once we have a clearer picture, we'll be able to really kind of map it out and look at the paths and what our projected power ratings are and point spreads on some of those games.
And with regards to UNLV, you talked about it. They need help. They need Fresno to go knock out Colorado State, which Fresno is a 3-point favorite over Colorado State. UNLV, this is a tough game going to San Jose State, but if they can pull this off, find their way into a Mountain West Conference championship, knock off Boise, which we thought they were the better team when they played
and
here.
That number will probably be Boise if they meet up again around 3.5.
Knock off Boise. They're not going to find themselves in the college football playoff, but man, what a heck of a story
it'd be great.
It's going to be, because
Right.
they're just on the outside looking in, and I think there's too many teams to leapfrog to find themselves into that.
I mean,
playoff.
and they are ranked 23rd in the country right now, which is phenomenal. Odom's done a great job. They've been ranked twice this year. Looking at this game against San Jose State, though, UNLV's 5-0 on the road, so they played really well on the road. A couple of interesting betting trends. They're 9-2 against the number their last 11 road games. But here's where it gets a little bit dicey against San Jose State. San Jose State is 5-0 in the last 5 games when playing at home against UNLV, and San Jose State is 12-2 the last 14 times they've played UNLV. So they've really dominated the series over the last 5 or 6 years.
And one of the things in this line is the fact that they played Boise State last week.
Right.
And it was an emotional output in a game that they
could have won.
Got up to an early
Right.
lead and then blew that league. And I talked about it week in, week out. When you play those high-level, high-energy games, it becomes very, very difficult to bounce back that next week. And that's why we see what we see in the SEC, and these teams beating each other up, is because you have a quality opponent every week that you're having
Right.
to play. And when you have to get up for those big games, it's continuously hard to have that energy output week after week after week.
So we touched a little bit on Ohio State and Indiana. They play each other 5-2, kind of the real first test for Indiana here. They're undefeated. But you look at this game, it's already gone up a full point from 11.5 to 12.5. So early push has clearly been on Ohio State so far in this game.
Yeah, and I think it's all in who is Indiana and what are they going to come with.
Right.
And Kurt Cignetti has done an absolutely
Great
fantastic job. You can only beat the teams that are in front of you. Not only have they beaten the teams that are in front of them, but they've been destroying the teams that are in front of them. Outside of the Michigan win, I think was a 5 or 6 point win. They have really been absolutely crushing their
But they
opponents.
haven't really been tested at all. That's
And
why I think
we're
this
going
game
to
is
see
so
what
big.
Rourke is
Right.
going to be able to do. And one of the things that I looked in this game was the total of 52. And that's been creeping down. It was 53 and now 52. Is this Indiana their whole season has been about that high-powered offense, and I don't see them with an opportunity to go win this game and put a show for national television to remain in that college playoff, that they go to be a show of themselves. I think their coaching staff wants to continue to throw the ball around, and they're going to try and go beat Ohio State. They're not going to try and steal this game against Ohio State. So I can see them throwing the ball against Ohio State.
They're going to have to.
Ohio State's going to probably be able to pick on this defense a little bit. So I think that total 52 could scream a little bit low, as I think this could be a rock'em, sock'em, shootout with these teams throwing the ball back and forth against each other.
Here's a couple of interesting betting trends for this game. Indiana 5-0 against the number on the road this year. Total's gone over in 5 of Indiana's last 5 road games. So 5-0 against the number, 5-0 over when on the road. Ohio State is 5-0 straight up when playing Indiana the last 5 times, and 5-0 against the number. So just kind of something to look at, a few interesting betting trends for both sides going into this game, but really a true test for Indiana. As I mentioned earlier, early action clearly has been trending upward, and it looks like it might go even a little bit higher as the first test for the Hoosiers so far this year. Another game we're going to dive into and look at right now is number 14, BYU, and 21, Arizona State. BYU comes off their first loss, really a kind of a heartbreaking loss, kind of a fluky play at the end of that game. But now they have a tough test again against Arizona State, where they find themselves a field goal underdog.
Yeah, and BYU obviously one of the biggest droppers with that loss to Kansas. They dropped 8 spots in the rankings all the way down. I believe they're the 14, and with the fact that they're still projected as a conference championship, they find themselves in the playoff. And really, there's some controversy to that, them dropping that far with the loss at Kansas. But I think it was a culmination of kind of how they've won these games. They had a squeaker that they beat Oklahoma State. They had a controversial win with a controversial call against Utah just a week ago, and then obviously they lose this game. And they come into this game against Arizona State as a 3.5-point underdog,
right.
And Arizona State, one of the better teams in the country, kind of a surprise
Very
team in
much.
the country. And Scadaboo has been the guy. It's just a
He
fun
was
name.
waiting to say that.
Fun name to say,
Right.
but an electric player, absolutely fantastic again from both the rushing and receiving standpoint. And we'll see if this BYU can suffer that loss get back up quickly, have to travel to Arizona State, and kind of regain this spot in the rankings because they have to keep winning. This is essentially Arizona
game.
State. This is a playoff game.
This is a playoff game. Right.
If they lose this game, they're out. And Arizona State could find a way to continue to sneak in. Actually, Colorado, Arizona State, they're
Iowa
hoping,
State.
They're
There's
all
a lot of
hoping
teams that are bunched
BYU
up right there.
Because that
right.
Big 12 has got kind of an open window to who can represent the Big 12.
So going into this game, you have BYU, who's 5-0 on the road. Arizona State is 5-0 at home. We've seen this number come down just a tad right now, but here's some really crazy, betting trends. Again, BYU 5-0 straight up in their last 5 games on the road. BYU is 9-1 straight up in their last 10 games. Arizona State is 5-0 against the number in their last 5 home games. So something has to give here for one of these two schools, but this is basically a playoff game in November.
Yeah, and it does feel like that the air has been kind of let out of the BYU balloon with the fact that
losing that game at home
really struggled and really should have lost probably the game to Utah. They found a way to squeak by there and then
very controversial ending of that game.
Even the ending of the Kansas game with the punt and
Yep.
hitting the guy in the helmet. But again, they've been in very, very close games, and they've been finding ways to win those games. And finally, this week they weren't able to, and that's why they find themselves a dog down in Arizona.
One more game we're going to touch on. Number 18, Army, undefeated Army at 9-0 against Notre Dame at 9-1. Notre Dame opened this game 16.5. It's gone down to 14.5. Total in this game is 45. I'm really curious to see how kind of Army plays this game. And Notre Dame. Notre Dame is in the playoff right now, the way we look at it. They're going to have that huge rivalry game later against Southern Cal, which isn't really good this year, but that's a game you think the Trojans would get up for. But really curious about this Army team here. And we've seen this number drop a full 2 points since early in the week.
Yeah, and going back to the BYU game we just had, BYU, their first loss, they lose to Kansas. They see themselves plummet in those college football rankings. And Notre Dame, who has probably the most embarrassing loss of all the teams in the top in the college football playoff, with the loss to Northern Illinois, continues to find themselves continuing to go up in the college football rankings. A team with no conference in Notre Dame, so they've got that gift of that schedule. You talked about having USC left on there, playing a down Florida State team. They've just been able to win the games. This is actually a game that, again, can improve their status with how Army has played. And I'm excited to see this matchup.
Yeah,
we had
same.
actually thought that this was going to be more of like a 17-point spread. It's been driven down to
it was 16.5. Almost there, right?
Closed down to that 14.5, and we'll see what this Army team can do. But Notre Dame has absolutely been bludgeoning people since that loss to Northern Illinois. They've been really putting it on. Marcus Freeman,
what were they doing to people again? They were what?
They were bludgeoning.
Okay, I like that.
They've been putting it on them, and I think that's, again, in today's college football, you have to go win, and you have to go win decisively to remain in these rankings. So after the Northern Illinois loss, they told themselves the only way that we can get back into this thing is to go absolutely, make a case for ourselves, and that's what they've been doing ever since. So there is but no foot off the gas for Notre Dame. They are looking to score some more, and continue to try and move up in these rankings. And like I said, the highest they can get is that 5 hole in the rankings because they're not in the conference. And I said the best spot in the entire college football playoff is to be sitting as the 5 seed, and Notre Dame, with winning out, that 5 seed looks really, really good to them.
I was going to laugh because I know he was going to say they're going to go ape. You know what? It was at the tip of his tongue. I could see it. Ape, crap, poop. But he was going to use a different word. But anyway, it's really going to be interesting this week, and I think over the last few weeks, to see, if an Indiana stubs their toe, loses to Ohio State, what happens with BYU and Arizona State and any of these other teams that are big favorites. If they lose, how does that kind of throw that wrench in? I love the playoff format. I love 12 teams, but as Jay touched on, we're not crazy about the way it's kind of set up right now. So we'll see over the next 2 weeks.
Well, the argument of Boise getting a bye,
of course,
and in the college football playoff being the number 4 seed is somewhat ludicrous to me. I think they're about the number 23rd team in the country when you look at power ratings as far as what a Las Vegas bookmaker, handicapper, how our numbers are being made. There's 20 teams in the country that would be favored over Boise State, and we're saying Boise State in the college football rankings is the number 4 team in the country. That's hard to swallow when you start to look at this. Alabama, from a power rating standpoint, is the number one team in the country. They would be favored over every team in college football on a neutral field. And as we sit today, they're the number 7 seed in the college football playoffs. So it just tells you what the SEC means from a week-to-week basis, and the number of teams that the SEC would have ranked in that top 10 if we just went by power ratings. And I think with the games left to go, there's still so much on the table where we talk about an SEC championship and an Alabama versus Texas, where Texas is currently sitting as the number 2 team in the country. They've got to still go play Texas A&M, and then they probably got to go play in an SEC championship game. And without winning those, they're going to fall, and somebody else is going to leapfrog. So the SEC is still going to have a major determination on where these seeds kind of go.
Don't you think that once, depending on how the committee maps everything out, though, they may realize, oh, wait, we have an SEC problem?
Well, they're going to have an SEC problem because whether it's Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Texas, they're going to have those teams being the
are they going to play each
10,
other?
11, 12. I don't think they're going to end up playing each other. What I think they're going to be is they're going to be the road team in the first round of the playoff, and they're going to be the favorites in all of those games. In all of those games, you're going to see an SEC team favored over a Big Ten team who's at home in a lot of those first-round playoffs.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting in the next couple of weeks, as Jay said. So tune in. We'll kind of break it down more as we go through this. But really quick, before we end the college segment, there are 3 lucky contestants left in the college last man standing. So congratulations, you guys. Last man standing sheets are out for this week. As we touched on, there's games, Thursday, Friday night, going into Saturday as well, the full slate. But congratulations, 3 of you guys left.
The one game we didn't bring up that I just want to mention real quickly is that ACC. Miami currently sitting as the team getting in from the ACC. SMU plays at Virginia this week. Pretty good favorite they are. If they win, they clinch a spot in that ACC championship game. Miami has to then go beat Wake and Syracuse to get in that SEC championship.
That's going to be a great game.
That could be a big decider of who wins that ACC championship. Clemson still has an outside shot if Miami was to have a hiccup. Neither one of these games, Clemson does have to go play South Carolina, who's been absolutely storming up the board from a ranking standpoint. But don't forget about those SEC games. There's still some team that can not only make is going to make the playoff, but is going to probably get a first round bye as an ACC, a higher ranked ACC team.
It's really going to be fun the next couple of weeks. I'm super excited that they expanded it. There so many games mean something, and going into the playoffs or going into that last really full schedule week in conference championship games is going to be fun. We'll be right back, and we're going to dive into a little pro football on the Sports Betting Podcast Bookends.
Grandma, who you like today? I'm just walking into Durango. State? Grandma, I'm not betting them. No way they win. No, you don't know ball. Grandma, State's getting blown out. No, I will not live bet them. Grandma, there's no way they come back.
It's a big 6. State pulls off a miracle comeback to win.
Grandma, you were right. I know. I should have bet them on STN Sports. Okay, I'll admit you know ball. I love you too, Grandma. Bye. Download the STN Sports app now.
Hey everybody, we're back here at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook for the Sports Betting Podcast Bookend, as usual, powered by STN Sports. And we're going to talk a little pro football now, Jay. There's some teams that are big surprises. There's some teams that are big disappointments. We're going to start with Thursday night football. One of the big surprises, I know we touched on it early in the season or before the season started, on this team being a surprise, but they are 8-2. They're undefeated since they put Russell Wilson at quarterback, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers, who come off a huge win at home against the Ravens. They played their divisional game here at Cleveland. They're around a 3.5 point favorite here. But this Steeler team, the way they play defense, the way they run the ball, and the way Russ is playing right now, they're a scary team that no one's going to want to play as the season moves on.
Yeah, and they're a team that's very, very popular from a betting standpoint, not only 8-2 straight up, but 8-2 against the point spread. So they're a team that's been cashing a lot of tickets for the betting public, continued to do so last week as a dog at home to the Ravens, where they settled for 6 field goals and scored the 18 points, but still find a way to win as an underdog against the Ravens.
It's funny, but you said that Joe Burrow has over 900 yards passing and 9 touchdowns against the Ravens. He's 0-2. Russell Wilson, 200 yards passing, no touchdowns. He's 1-0.
Well, that's what we talked about.
Excuse me.
Bless you. The Steeler team, that's what they've been able to do. And we talked about this from before the season started. They've got that monster offensive line. They've got the two-headed monster at running back, especially with Jalen Warren, continuing to get healthier and healthier as the season's gone on. Now we're sprinkling in Russell Wilson to Pickens, Mike Williams, Freiermuth. They've got all the pieces of the puzzle. Now they're going to welcome or go into this Cleveland Browns team, which has been nothing but an utter disappointment. Obviously, the Deshaun Watson injury, how poorly he played. Jameis Winston's come back. They've had a little bit of spark in the passing game, finding the young Elijah Moore, Tillman, finding the Njoku a little bit more, Judy. Haven't been able to get the running
is healthy now. He just got updated from questionable to healthy, so he should be in that lineup on Thursday
Haven't
night.
been able to get that running back going, especially with Nick Chubb, who's been able to come back from the devastating injury. They were a very, very popular play over the last several weeks from we'll call it sharp or wise guy action. In particular, the last week when they traveled to the Saints.
They clearly didn't get there.
Got a lot of money on the Browns down in New Orleans, and then they went down there and ran into Taysom Hill.
I would say they just couldn't get over the hill. They just couldn't get over it.
Both from a rushing standpoint, receiving standpoint, they had him throwing the ball out of the backfield. He was kind of a man for all things, and the Browns had no solve to that. And when you look at
when they fell behind by 3 scores, they just couldn't get up the hill. Right? They just couldn't do it.
If you couldn't stop Kamara and you couldn't stop Taysom Hill, and now you have to go try and figure, and that New Orleans front isn't as good as what this Steelers front is. Now, again, I know you're going home, which is a big deal because I think the Browns at home are a very, very different team than when they go on the road. I think even Jameis Winston has a lot more confidence at home, and they're a formidable bunch at home. And this game, we opened the Steelers a 4-point favorite. We've been bet down to 3.5.
This could be a little bit of a letdown game for the Steelers, winning that game against the Ravens the week before.
Well, letdown doesn't seem like a word that's in Mike Tomlin's dictionary. And they just continuously, they have that style that doesn't allow for letdowns because you're not depending on an offense to throw the ball out. You're depending on a good, solid defense and a good running game. And so they're not going to give Cleveland a ton of time and ball control. They're going to have to stop Winston and that offense a handful of times, and then they're going to go what they do and grind the game out. And that's why you see the low total. But again, the fact that they play these low-scoring games, the fact that they didn't score a touchdown last week is why that 3.5 and 4, I think, is a really big deal, and why the betting public or the betting sharp guys have been on the Browns in this situation.
So we touched on last week that, and shame on us. I mean, we talked about that game against the Ravens. Total went from 47.5 to 48.5, one of the higher totals on the board. And what did the Steelers and Ravens do? They've now played 8 straight unders. It was a game that
we talked about it. They were all close games and all unders, and this total
So-
seemed awfully high. But the Ravens' secondary had been so bad,
Right.
and for one reason, and one reason only. They played the Bengals twice, and Joe Burrow lit them up.
Yeah.
If you take those games
but
that
Burrow's
secondary
done that,
is okay.
Burrow's done that now for 3 straight years where he owns that Ravens for whatever reason. But a couple of interesting betting trends. Touchdown Steelers 5-0 straight up in their last 5 games since Russell Wilson's become quarterback. Cleveland is 4-1 straight up in their last 5 games when playing the Steelers at home. But here's the one that really jumps off the page. The total's gone under in 8 of the Browns' last 11 games when playing at home against the Steelers. So maybe that's why you've seen this number come down a little bit. Anything more than a field goal, maybe some value on Cleveland here because they played so many tight games against each other. We're going to jump into the marquee games now on Sunday. The one that really kind of jumps off the page, Niners-Packers. We talked about the Steelers being that surprise team. Disappointing teams, the Niners, 5-5. I know they've had injuries, but a lot of teams have had injuries. It's the fact they find ways to lose in the fourth quarter and who they're losing to. They're a dog here to Green Bay. Then they're going to play Buffalo where they might be a dog. This is a Browns or a Niners team that could be at best maybe 6-6 after 12 games. They're really a disappointment at this point. And you look at that division. I know they're only a game back, but they're in last place right now in the NFC West.
Yeah, and I think it's a question of identity of who are the San Francisco 49ers. We saw this team dominate last year, and they were a Christian McCaffrey led team, and he ran the football, he caught the football out of the backfield, and then when you were worried about Christian McCaffrey, that's when a George Kittle, a Deebo Samuel, a Brandon Ayuk would pop on you, and you couldn't find a way to cover all these guys. With McCaffrey out of the lineup essentially all season, you've had Deebo banged up, We've had Kittle banged up, Ayuk has been lost for the season, they've sprinkled in Juwan Jennings, but they don't have an identity. You don't know who they are on any given week, and the injuries have just kind of bottled them up, and now they're going to go back into this week. Again, George Kittle is still beat up. We haven't seen the Deebo Samuel that we've seen, for several seasons. But the big thing is if they're all back, they're all back. And if you can find a way to get McCaffrey, Deebo, Kittle, a newly recovered, or a new star, a budding star in Juwan Jennings, and then have Brock Purdy be Brock Purdy, you can see who the 49ers can be. But they just haven't been that team, and that's what's starting to bring in the questions of what is Shanahan doing in bringing these guys together. And they haven't been able to play good football, and they haven't been getting good football or timely football on the defensive side of things. And we saw just this past week where Seattle, with,
it was a big game for our side of the counter.
Geno Smith able to find Smith Najigma for several catches, able to run the football. They were able to do things that normally that San Francisco defense doesn't allow. They haven't been able to get the pressure on the quarterback, haven't been able to get those quarterbacks down, and I think that's where they're losing these games. And now they got to go up against this Green Bay Packers team that's been on a little bit of a roll, not playing awesome football, but winning football games. And you have kind of the same dynamic on their side of you have all these wide receiver weapons, a monster running back in Jacobs, and if Love can just get some protection and not get hammered in that backfield, he can get those balls out to those dynamic weapons, and then that's when good things happen for the Green Bay Packers.
Green Bay really should have lost to Chicago on Sunday. Bears got that field goal blocked, but that's a whole other story. But I think the one surprising thing for the Packers right now, we always talk about teams that are so dominant at home. Nobody wants to go play there, and we always say that about Lambeau. But this year the Packers, they're only 3-2 at home, and a loss here to the 49ers just puts them at 3-3. So they're only a 2.5-point favorite against San Francisco. I think that tells you that if the Niners are healthy and these guys are back, that they're still a formidable opponent and can go in there and win this game.
Yeah, and what's going on with Arizona and the Rams leapfrogging the Niners? This turns into a must-win game for the San Francisco 49ers. And I will caution you, and some heads up, in that traditionally, I don't have the stats in front of me, but traditionally, teams that play on Thanksgiving Day tend to struggle the week before. Now, maybe that's just historically that we see the Lions, who have struggled for years, so they always struggle the week
Not anymore.
Before. But for those of you that don't know, the Dolphins travel to Green Bay next Thursday night. Not the traditional teams that play on Thanksgiving, obviously, with what normally used to seeing the Lions and the Cowboys, who are going to play the morning and afternoon game. But Dolphins, two Packers, and what seems like a great matchup for the Packers in that the Dolphins have to travel to the cold weather in kind of late November would be advantageous Packers, and maybe it'll end up being that on Thanksgiving Day.
I always like the fresh catch of the day and not frozen fish.
But Packers do play next Thursday night, so is it a potential look-ahead spot where the Niners can go steal a game here?
And I'm going to piggyback off what you just said, is because guess what? Those 3 Thanksgiving Day games, numbers are up.
Yep. We decided to already put them up. So those of you that are just here for us this weekend, come in the book, get on the app. Those games are already up. Or if you want to take advantage of us and parlay this week's games to those Thanksgiving Day games, go after those big.
So you can bet against the Bears this week and next week.
Or bet on the Lions this week and next week, and the Cowboys. I mean, there's all kinds of different combinations. But again, it adds for some interesting dynamics. And not only the Thanksgiving Day games, but the Black Friday game between our Raiders and the Chiefs is also on the board as well.
So another good game here on Sunday, and that's we commented and we talked a little bit about the Niners and where they sit in the NFC West, but it's the surprising Arizona Cardinals, who have played really well of late. They come off their bye. They're starting to get healthy. They play at Seattle. This game's kind of a pick-em game. We're waiting to see which way you guys kind of push us on this game. Seattle comes off that big win at San Francisco where they've lost 6 games in a row, but this might really set the stage for that NFC West. A Cardinal win here, and they go to 7-4. Tough place to go play. These teams have played a lot of unders there. We'll get into some of the betting trends, but a really intriguing matchup with Kyler Murray and Geno Smith facing off on Sunday, which is basically a pick-em game in the NFC West.
Yeah, and the Cardinals have been doing it despite we know all the names on offense with Harrison and Kyler Murray and McBride and James Conner. They've been winning games on the defensive side of the football. They've been absolutely fantastic on defense. I think they're on a stretch of 3 games in a row, allowing 13 points or less, and even 10 points or less. So again, from a defensive standpoint, they get the clock control. They use a lot of Conner to run the football, and then Murray running the football, and then they find a way to get those key kind of plays to the big men. But they're not the Kyler Murray throwing for 300 to 400 yards. They're a 250 passing offense with sprinkling in that run or trying to dominate with that run, which should bode success against this Seattle team, who really needs what it seems like a lot of possessions for Geno Smith to get going. But again, if he can find Metcalf and find Smith-Njigba has really become his Tyler Lockett of old. He's now the possession receiver, the guy he looks for. And then when you're going to add a Kenneth Walker able to run the football, there's no question as to why this game's a pick'em. This is a very, very difficult game to pick.
Really good game. Some interesting betting trends here, though, you guys. We kind of touched on it a little bit. So first, Arizona 5-1 against the number their last 6 games. Seattle is 5-0 straight up in their last 5 games when playing Arizona. But the big one, total has gone under 5 straight games when Seattle and Arizona have met in Seattle. So something to kind of think about a little bit when these two teams square off, even though it's a really high total in this game. Another game we'll look at now, Lions-Colts. In my opinion, Lions are the best team in football right now. Even with injuries, you look at that offense, and we said it last week on Bookends that even though they were 14-point favorites or more, that they're going to score 30 or 40 points by accident. They scored over 50. We just didn't see Jacksonville with Mac Jones could compete, and that was the case. I mean, they were down 21-0 or 21-7, 28-7 very early in the game. They're a little bit over a touchdown favorite here. The Colts come in with a big win, road win against the Jets to kind of get themselves back in the wild card discussion. But this Lions team is just phenomenal. I know what Jay talked about, teams that play on Thanksgiving sometimes lose or don't cover the week before, but this Lion team just seems to get it done week in and week out. St. Brown's playing great. You've got a two-headed monster at running back that is so good in Gibbs and Montgomery right now. They dominate, and you have to put Jared Goff in the MVP discussion. He's just been phenomenal over the last month of the season.
Yeah, and from our standpoint, Lions are 9-1 straight up, 8-2 against the spread. So just like that, Pittsburgh Steelers, a lot of tickets being cashed on the Lions. A lot of betting on them to win the Super Bowl. The betting public has become Lion fans, and there's a ton of Lions money. So from our side of the counter, I'm the last person that wants to talk about the Lions or cheer for the Lions because we need the other side. So
they're in the NFC North.
I'm going to talk about the fact that the third best team in the National Football League against the spread is the Indianapolis Colts. Despite the fact that they're 5-6 straight up, they are 8-3 against the point spread here and catching a touchdown from this Lions team. The Lions have been beating up on what we'll call the little sisters of the poor in the NFL the last couple weeks, in that they put on a show against the Cowboys, they put on a show against the Jaguars, and they've been having a lot of fun, and they've been flea flickers and haven't had to play a lot of defense. And not that the Indianapolis Colts have this defense that is a stand-up defense. They're kind of a bend but don't break. But we saw them able to beat the Jets last week on the road, and Anthony Richardson is one of those guys that has that dynamicness to him. Hasn't been able to put it all together, right, but you can see that it's there. And if he can have one of those games where he can go rush for 50 to 60 yards, and we can add Jonathan Taylor to be able to rush for 80 to 120 yards, and they can control the clock when they have guys like Downs and Mitchell and Pittman and Pierce, they do have the weapons to play and keep up with potentially this Detroit offense. And we have seen Detroit go on the road in a dome and struggle in Houston, which they threw 5 interceptions. So there is that, maybe that little chink in the armor to find a way for the Colts to cover here. And
that was an AFC South team as well.
And then on top, that the Lions play on Thanksgiving Day next week in a battle with the Chicago Bears, a divisional rival. So maybe there's that slight look ahead. And again, I'm not telling you that I like the Colts. I'm telling you that from a bookmaking standpoint, I'm cheering for the Colts because you guys are loaded up on the Lions every week.
A couple of quick, interesting betting trends. Detroit 5-0 in their last 5 games on the road. Indy 5-1 straight up in their last 6 games when playing Detroit, and the total has gone over 4 of the last 5 times when these two teams have played. So I could see scoring in this one again because Detroit scores so many points that your opposition has to be able to open it up and score as well. So you look for Indianapolis to kind of do that.
And not only have they been beating us on Detroit, but they've been beating us on all the props that we have available on the STN app, from Amon St. Brown to score a touchdown, which I think is now 8 straight weeks they scored a touchdown. Montgomery, Gibbs. We have all these touchdown props up that they've been betting each and every week on the Lions for these guys to score. And again, continuing to cash tickets on all these Lions touchdown props.
So we talked about the Sunday morning and Sunday afternoon games. We're going to jump now to Sunday night football. This is a really intriguing matchup. It's the red-hot Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles were 2-2. There was talks about, is Sirianni gone? Has he lost the team? He makes questionable calls. They've now won 6 games in a row. Part of that was A.J. Brown was banged up. Goddard was banged up. Smith was banged up. They're healthy now. They're getting Saquon Barkley more and more involved every week. This is a great game. They're a road favorite against the Rams, and a Ram team that's in second place right now in the NFC West. Really intriguing matchup, though, because there's probably no team outside of the Lions that is as hot as the Philadelphia Eagles right now.
Yeah, and 2 teams that want to kind of run the football first, despite the fact that obviously the Rams with Stafford and Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp have this passing offense. They want to feed Kyren Williams. They want to give him the ball 20 to 25 times, keep that Philadelphia Eagles offense off the field. So I expect this to be a game where they want to use Kyren Williams until the point where the Eagles score on them and they get down, and then it turns into the Nacua and Cooper Kupp game.
Well, but speaking of that, and you're right, is that we've seen this total go up, Jay, from 47.5 to 50.5. We're still kind of midweek, so that's a huge jump, 3 points. So you guys clearly are saying Eagles-Rams, Sunday Night Football, there is going to be a lot of points scored.
Yeah, and I think that's how the Rams actually go and win this game, is try and get in a shootout and kind of exploit that Eagles defense and try and play an up-and-down type game. I think the Eagles want to run the football. They always want to run the football with Hurts and Barkley, but when you have a Brown and a Devontae Smith sprinkled in, you should be able to find some holes in that Rams secondary. Other teams have been able to do so. So I do see that up-and-down game potentially happening here, which we've seen on Sunday Night Football all too often, where we have that back-and-forth shootout like we did with the Bengals and Chargers last week.
Just a couple of interesting betting trends here. Eagles, as we talked about, red hot, 5-0, straight up in their last 5 games. They're 5-0 against the number in their last 5 games and playing on the road against the Rams. Rams 4-1 straight up in their last 5 games. Their only loss coming on that Monday night game against the Dolphins. Rams 7-2 straight up in their last 9 games at home, and they're catching a field goal here against the Eagles. Now let's jump on Monday Night Football. What a great matchup. I mean, you got the Harbaugh brothers who faced off in the Super Bowl not that long ago, playing on Monday Night Football as the Ravens travel to L.A. So Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers get back-to-back primetime games. This is a really good matchup because the Ravens at 7-4, and 7-4 is good, but to me they're a little bit of a disappointment right now. You never know what Raven team you're going to get. That loss to the Raiders and some of the other losses they've had just kind of stand out to me a little bit. This Charger team right now is clicking on all cylinders. They look great. They've got some young wide receivers that are playing good. Two-headed monster at running back in Dobbins and Edwards. Justin Herbert is playing good, and that defense is lights out. Really fun matchup, I think, on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, and I think you talked about the Ravens, the up and down, up and down, up and down. Well, last week was the down week, so that means that this week is the up week, and we continue to question what this team is. They have all the tools. They've added additional tools in Deontay Johnson, who hasn't really been able to do much of anything so far as a Raven. But this feels like a week for me. Again, they're a 3-point favorite at the Chargers. So, from the line, it's somewhat telling you that the Ravens are the better team, despite the fact the way the Chargers have been playing. Again, the Chargers beat Cincinnati last week, and with all due respect to the Cincinnati Bengals, the only team that the Bengals have played tough is that Raven team. Everybody else has kind of been able to play with that with the Bengal team.
Right.
Chargers were suffocating them, and then they allowed them to leak back into that game. So there were some holes. There are some holes in that Chargers defense. They've had to play some soft teams. They've been able to win those games. But it's been with Dobbins and Edwards has been the running game, and they haven't really been dependent on Justin Herbert to throw the football. But
he is throwing much better now.
Much more.
Right.
And he's starting to find McConkey and
Quentin Johnson
and the Ravens. We have said that the Ravens' problem is in that secondary, but it's really only been in that secondary in games against the Bengals. Right. And the secondary has held up in other games. So we'll see if the Chargers are able to find the similar hole, because the Chargers are probably not going to be able to find a hole in that Ravens running game, which they want to do the Dobbins and Edwards combination. The Ravens aren't going to allow that. So if the Chargers are going to win that game, it's going to have to be on the arm of Justin Herbert, and this defense is going to have to stand up similar to the way the Steelers did last week. And obviously the Steelers were able to get in the red zone several times or get down there with the ability to kick.
They couldn't punch it in, though, right.
6 field goals. So it's a bend but not break defense for the Ravens. So the Chargers have to not be a Cameron Dicker-led team and kick a bunch of field goals. They have to punch the ball in the end zone, because I do think the Ravens are going to be the good Ravens this week, and we're going to see a little bit more scoring out of this Ravens offense.
You're going to need Justin Herbert to really have a good game with Johnson, McConkey, Palmer. They're going to have to step up a little bit. I know he does use Dobbins out of the backfield a lot. They're going to have a little bit different approach than that kind of milk the clock, run the ball 25 to 30 times. They're going to have to open it up a little bit against the
Ravens. It'll be interesting. The one thing I see in this game is, again, we talk about the Los Angeles Chargers have a lack of a home field advantage, and we saw a lot of Bengal fans, almost overwhelming, where you could hear them cheering during the Chargers were on offense. I have a feeling we're going to see the same thing this week, where that's going to be a very Baltimore Raven fan base in Los Angeles in that Chargers game. So again, expecting a big turnaround from the Ravens this week.
A couple of interesting betting trends here. Baltimore's gone over 6 of their last 7 road games. They've gone over 6 of their last 7 games, period. Chargers 5-1 straight up and 5-1 against the number in their last 6 games. So really kind of interesting. And before we jump into some other sports, though, unofficially, ding, 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 looks like we have a winner in the last man standing contest, pro football. The lucky winner for this past week had the Saints. So he clearly is a Tyson Hill fan right now. It was a game that we saw really the sharper, sophisticated move on the Browns. He went to Saints, and we had the losers. One had Cincy, one had the Commanders, one had the Raiders, one had the Chiefs, and one had the 49ers. And of all those big teams that were in there, I mean, it was the Saints that looks like it got there for the one lucky winner. We'll talk more about him and congratulate him next week once it's official. But it looks like we do have a winner in the Pro Football Last Man Standing. We're going to look at NBA and NHL of who's hot, who's not, and nobody's as hot as the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA right now. You look at the Cavs, Celtics, OKC, Golden State, really teams that are playing really good basketball right now and are hot. I think the biggest disappointment, probably the Sixers, Jazz, and Pelicans, who aren't, but these Cavs are really the story right now in the NBA.
Well, obviously they suffered their first loss to the Celtics last night, making them 15-1 straight up. However, they're 12-4 against the spread, so it's not only that they've been able to win the games, but they've been able to win the games against the point spread and continue to do so even in that loss to Boston last night, where they were a 6-point dog, only lose by 3. So again, you cash your tickets on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Right. When you talk about the Boston Celtics, obviously they knocked them off. They're 12-3 straight up, but they have not been as good from a cashing ticket standpoint, where they're 7-8
as they were last year at this point.
They're 7-8 against the point spread, so they're not one of those teams that has been super hot from you from a standpoint of cashing tickets. The team that is hot for you that maybe is not doing so well from a over-the-counter winning or on the court standpoint is the Brooklyn Nets. They're 6-9 straight up, but 10-4-1 against the point spread. So they're a team that you should look at from against this point spread number. Brooklyn Nets not getting a lot of respect or not doing very well on the court with a losing record, but doing very, very well in cashing tickets for you against that point spread. And then you talked about the Golden State Warriors, 10-3 straight up, and they're 9-4 against the point spread. So then again, doing a good job of cashing tickets for you. And then on the flip side, another team that's not hot winning on the court, the Toronto Raptors. 3-12 overall on the court. However, they're 10-5 against the point spread. So 2 teams that we should be looking at from a standpoint of, hey, not playing well, but playing well enough to cash tickets. Take a look at those Raptors and the Nets, teams that are getting you some money and winning tickets.
So looked at the NBA, now dive into the NHL a little bit. Teams that are hot, Hurricanes, Devils, Caps, Panthers, Leafs, and out west, Jets 30 points, Wild 25 points, even the Knights still right now 24 points. Teams that are not, I think Pens and Red Wings really disappointing. The struggles of the Bruins as well made a coaching change, but the Preds really with all the moves they made in the offseason with Marshy and Stamkos, really a disappointment right now with the way they've played out west.
Yeah, and you talk about Nashville, and they are the biggest disappointment. There's no kind of against the spread in hockey, so we'll use it on kind of a money management standpoint in hockey. If you were betting to win win $100, whether they're a favorite or a dog. If they're the favorite, you're laying whatever it is to win 100. If they're the dog, it's 100 to win whatever. If you were betting on Nashville, you're 6-13 and you're down $882 betting on the Nashville Predators. You brought up the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Right.
They're 7-13. You'd be down $782 if you're betting on the Pittsburgh Penguins. And you talked about that Boston Bruins who made the coaching change. They're 8-12, but that you'd be minus $600 if you're betting on the Bruins. So those are traditionally teams that you would say, hey, I want to bet on these teams. They're going to make me money. The teams that are making you money, number one, obviously the Winnipeg Jets. You'd be plus $911 if you were just betting $100 in each one of the Winnipeg Jets games. Obviously 16-3. They're a big chalk favorite in a lot of their games, in particular at home. But again, $911 to the plus side betting on the Winnipeg Jets. The Washington Capitals, now a little maybe an injury bug for Ovechkin, but they're 13-5. You'd be plus $840 on the Capitals. And then there's a monster drop-off to really not a lot of hot, as we see a lot of kind of mediocre teams. But Carolina 13-4 straight up in wins, but only a plus 346 against the money. So it's really the Winnipeg Jets and the Washington Capitals that you've been able to make that money on. And that's because they've been doing so well on the road, which is the key to making money when you're looking at teams in the National Hockey League. If you can find a team that is playing well on the road, betting them on the road where they're going to be a plus money or a short favorite, that's where you can make those dollars rather than playing on these really, really good teams when they're at home and you're having to lay that big money, having to lay a $2 favorite or a $3 favorite, not normally the spot that you want to get into. So if you can find these hot NHL teams on the road in shorter prices, that's the spots to play them.
So we touched a little bit on NBA and NHL, but also this weekend we've got Formula One here in Vegas. We talk about it all the time. When there's an event out here, it becomes kind of king. And I think it just screams volumes of when there's a sporting event in Vegas, you see the largest handle out of any sport. Last year's race, record handle on Formula One. My guess is this year's race is going to easily shatter that. There is so many things on the app to bet right now. Check it out, from qualifying to driver to constructor. There's so much stuff. The podium. Check it out. Formula One in Vegas. It's the late race on Saturday night. A lot of cool stuff going on.
Yeah, and Verstappen has obviously been the guy that seems to win every race in the F1, and he's not a monster favorite that he was last year, to where you were getting monster prices on just about every other driver. It's kind of a three-pronged race, three guys that are around to 2-1.
Norris, Leclerc. There's other drivers that are up that you're seeing some action on as well.
So it's going to be great matchups. Again, the staying up late and watching it is a lot of fun. I'm not an F1 fan, and I will tell you that when they were here last year and watching this race,
we were both
very,
fans, though.
very, very enjoyable to watch.
Right.
And Chucky said it. Get on the STN Sports app. The app is absolutely loaded up with F1 props. I had to take a double check on how much stuff we were actually offering and looking at prices, and not only to win the race, but to finish top 3, finish top 6, finish top 10, matchup wagering. You talked about the different cars, the manufacturers. It's unreal how many props we have on the F1.
And again, being here, I know you guys how you love sporting events here. Check it out and have some fun on Saturday night. So for Jason, I'm Chucky for the Sports Betting Podcast Bookends. Again, powered by STN Sports. Good luck. Congratulations to our unofficial winner and last man standing. And we will see you guys next week here at Red Rock.